Imagine you're sitting in your living room and you feel like you're being watched. You hear a faint scratching behind the wallpaper. You find a glass of milk on the counter that you didn't pour. You think you're losing your mind, but you're not. In 1986, a family in Townsend, Massachusetts realized that their ghost wasn't a spirit at all. It was a person, a teenager dressed in a blonde wig and face paint, living inside the narrow cavities of their walls for months, watching them sleep, eating their food, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This is the bone-chilling true story of Daniel LaPlante, one of the most terrifying home intruders in history. It started with the Andrews family. Annie Andrews was a teenager who had recently lost her mother. One day, she started communicating with a boy named Daniel via the phone. He seemed nice, a bit odd, but sympathetic. They went on one date, but Annie found him creepy and told him she didn't want to see him again. That should have been the end of it, but for Daniel LaPlante, it was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, the Andrews house became a nightmare. It started small, things were moved. Then, the walls started talking. They would hear knocking from inside the walls. Strange messages appeared written in blood-red ink, which turned out to be ketchup or paint on the walls. "I'm in your room," or "Come find me." The father, thinking it was a prank or a ghost, even called a medium. They were terrified, but they had no idea that Daniel had found a crawl space and was literally living between the studs of their 19th century home. The breaking point came when Annie and her sister were home alone. They saw a figure in the hallway, a person dressed in their deceased mother's clothes, wearing a blonde wig and white face paint, holding a hatchet. They screamed and ran to a neighbor. When the police arrived, they searched the house top to bottom. They found nothing, until one officer noticed a tiny, loose panel in the back of a closet. When they pried it open, they found a hollow space just large enough for a person. Inside were blankets, food wrappers, and a small opening that allowed a view directly into the girl's bedroom. Daniel LaPlante had been watching them for months. He was arrested, but because he was a juvenile, he was eventually released on bail. And that is where this story turns from creepy to catastrophic. Months later, in 1987, Daniel was out. He wasn't done. He broke into another home nearby, the home of the Gustafson family. Priscilla Gustafson was a nursery school teacher, pregnant with her third child. Her husband was at work. Daniel entered the house armed with a stolen .22 caliber rifle. What happened next is one of the most brutal crimes in Massachusetts history. Daniel didn't just rob them, he murdered Priscilla in her bedroom. Then, in an act of pure evil, he took her two young children, Abigail and William, and drowned them in the family bathtub. When the husband came home to find his entire world destroyed, the hunt for Daniel LaPlante became the state's top priority. Police found Daniel hiding in a dumpster, still covered in mud and blood. He was no longer a ghost in the walls, he was a cold-blooded monster. During the trial, the details of his childhood and his obsession with the occult came to light, but nothing could justify the horror he inflicted. Daniel LaPlante was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms. He is still in prison today, one of the few people who will truly never see the light of day again. The case of Daniel LaPlante changed the way we think about home security. It's the reason why, when we hear a creak in the floorboards or a scratch in the wall, we don't just think ghosts. We think of the person who might be standing right behind the drywall waiting. What's the scariest thing you've ever heard in your house at night? Let me know in the comments. If you want more stories like this, hit the like button and subscribe. Stay safe, and maybe check your closets tonight.